My dad watched the Signs episode. He liked the Signs episode. He liked the Bird Box episode. He just refuses to listen to the Sleepy Hollow episode. He just won't do it.
Does he not like Sleepy Hollow?
I don't know if it's that he doesn't like Sleepy Hollow or he just has no interest, but I'm just like, hey, have you listened to the Sleepy Hollow episode yet? And he's just like, no, I'll get back to that one eventually. I'm just like, why? What is this hang up?
Maybe he's listened to it and he thinks it's so bad. And he's like, I haven't listened to it because he doesn't want to tell you that he thinks it's terrible.
As much as I think that would be a funny answer, I do know my dad enough to know that he wouldn't do that. He would just tell me.
I'd be like, yes, son, so your podcast is bad.
Hey, I mean, it's how it is. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Watch No Evil. This is Matt.
And this is Zach.
And today we're going to be talking about one of the most well-recognized and most highly acclaimed horror films of all time. 1998's Three Ninjas High Noon at Mega Mountain featuring Hulk Hogan as the villain. So, Zach, what did you like about this movie?
Why would you do this to me?
All right, so we're actually going to be talking about the movie The Silence of the Lambs with Anthony Hopkins playing the titular role of Hannibal Lecter. I think that this is one of the most important pop culture movies just in terms of references, because you're going to find references to this in other horror movies. You're going to find references to this in comedy movies, actually, probably more often, but Zach, you knew about the movie before we ended up watching it. Did any of those references come back to you?
Yeah, so I'd heard put the lotion in the basket thing. 'Cause that's the thing that everyone quotes in this movie. This is the first time I've seen this movie. I thought that it was Hannibal that said that. I didn't realize that there was actually another serial killer in this movie.
Yeah, Buffalo Bill. It's interesting that you say you've referenced two pop culture references that pertain to Buffalo Bill. I really know everybody as doing the "Hello, Clarice," like the really up close and soft. Obviously, the other one, that iconic scene of Hannibal getting wheeled out and he's got the mask over his face and he's straight jacketed to the little dolly that's got him. I mean, that's used in so many things. It's used in The Simpsons. Yeah, it's interesting because this movie has two really important villain characters and they get referenced all the time, but nobody ever talks about the moth imagery with this movie.
Right. The moth kind of seems injected into it. Like they straight up explain, oh, the moths represent change and transformation, and that's to do with Buffalo Bill's wish to be transsexual and all this stuff, and it's like explained before you even give the audience a chance to try to find an explanation for it. And it's like, we wanted to put something on the cover of this movie, so we're gonna have this moth over someone's face.
Yeah, I think that the moth might have been the weakest part of the movie, that there's the chrysalis that they find in the girl's mouth. It uses it as a plot device, obviously, because it's just like, oh, this person we were able to trace was caught with this set of moths that it never feels like it's really important to the movie. And I think that that's why it never gets referenced. However, the cover image of the movie, I think, gets referenced a lot.
I think that it goes just as far as they say it's a death head's moth. And if you look at the cover and if you look up a picture of a death head's moth, there's a skull-looking pattern on its head. So I think it's creepy because it's got a skull. Mm-hmm. And there are other images of butterflies in Buffalo Bill's house. Like, you see there's the picture of a butterfly, and there's like that wind chime that's shaped like a butterfly, and you see other images like it throughout the movie. I'm just not completely sold on this transformation. It just doesn't feel like it should be as big as they wanted it to be.
Yeah, I mean, butterflies are used, I think, a lot in movies to show transformation, also to show like freedom, but it's sort of the ugly duckling theory too, that it's just like, oh, the caterpillar is ugly and then the butterfly is the beautiful one. And I think that it's trying to be like, oh, this is what Buffalo Bill is striving for. And there's sort of, some discourse about whether or not it's like society's fault that Buffalo Bill is the way that he is, because he was mistreated as a child, and that trauma has left him wanting to be something other than what he is, which in typical like social constructs, that is to be the opposite gender. So man to woman, woman to man. Part of it too has to do a little bit with his skills as a tailor, particularly because when Jodie Foster is in the house when she's visiting the families of the victims, and she, right before she calls her boss and says they had to be a skilled tailor, she looks in the closet and you see sort of the dress pattern that is being made, and it's got the like diamonds, and the diamond back part of the dress has this butterfly wing cut pattern that is used for it. And I particularly thought that when I saw it, I was like, oh, this is sort of another reference, and there's a femininity to butterflies that I think Buffalo Bill might find enduring, and that could be another layer.
Yeah. Well, while we're on the subject, might as well bring up the whole transsexuality thing. It's almost like the directors were like, what would a transsexual person do? And they just kind of like threw everything at the wall.
Yeah.
And it seems like everything's stuck because they just put all this stuff in it, and like, he's a serial killer. First and foremost, he's a serial killer. So obviously not a good dude. Hannibal says that Buffalo Bill wanted to be a woman because it's the furthest thing from himself. And the implications there are like, oh, transsexual people hate themselves when they're in their original sex. And that's not a very great implication.
Yeah, well, I also, just before we continue going on, you're using transsexual, which is, of course, the language that they use in the film, which is also sort of outdated, and we have transgender now, which I think is more correct. And I absolutely agree with your assertion that there's this sort of harmfulness that it does to the community, not only in them hating themselves, but also this portrayal of otherism and this idea that people who are trans are mentally unstable for some reason. And actually, I think horror does a really bad job of representing anyone in the LGBTQ community. But trans people, it is especially dangerous too. And I think that it sort of became a historical film issue with The Crying Game, which also is sort of well known for its interaction with a trans person. But also there's always this idea that people are abused, they are then mentally destabilized, and then that causes them to sort of assert this trans identity. And in horror, it's especially prevalent. Insidious 2 with Parker Crane, the bride in black, who was abused by his mother because the father ran out on them, and so she makes him dress as a girl and act as a girl. And then he tries to castrate himself. So there's this whole injustice that's really done to people. And I think that this movie might have been particularly triggering.
Especially, this is from 1991, so obviously everything's a little outdated, but especially, like you said, transsexual, outdated term. I should have been using transgender instead of that. With Hannibal being a psychiatrist and then kind of treating this subject in that way, it definitely kind of gives you a sign of the times of it's abnormal. Back in 1991, I think that was shocking to people, and it has this trans idea, I think, is often used as a shock factor in horror movies, like in Insidious 2. it's revealed that, oh, the bride started out as a young boy who was then abused, and like you said, and it kind of has this shock value to it. Oh, it was a boy the whole time, and even though it wasn't, and it's kind of like this. It's like to throw the audience into confusion, and here it's not so much used in that way, but it's like to make the audience a little uncomfortable with the character of Buffalo Bill, which is really, which like you said, it could be very triggering because trans people don't want people to feel uncomfortable around them. That's just insulting. And I think the idea behind that with Buffalo Bill's character is to compound that uncomfortable feeling with the fear produced by the unpredictability with any serial killer.
Right. You could even throw this all the way back to like gender dysphoria, to Psycho, where Norman Bates, he's not the one killing people, but him dressing up as his mother, this like cross-dressing character that kills women. It's just equated cross-dressing with a mental illness and homicidal tendencies, and that's I think also a significant problem, because that was meant to be extraordinarily shocking, and I believe that it was at its time. Yeah, for that, the movie, I think, has not aged well, and the movie is really masterfully done. It is a good movie. However, the way that they talk about and describe Buffalo Bill is less than effective. One of the things that I was reading about was this argument that it did a lot for women and feminism in those years, because it portrays misogyny in police work, and sort of this, police work has often been sort of called a boys' club, and then her ability to like live out the victims' lives as women, not as just these like mysterious objects with no soul, but they have a pattern that they walk every day. But she's actually able to sort of reconstruct their life as a woman in the Midwest, and that's what leads her to find Buffalo Bill in the first place. So what it gets right for women, it gets horribly wrong for the trans community.
Right. Yeah, it's although it's a great movie, it does that injustice, but people didn't understand it like we do now, or at least some people do now.
This is by no means a forgiveness of Silence of the Lambs. Just because it is a good movie does not negate the damage that it has done. But it is interesting, and it has led to a lot of historical film significance. So it's, something that should be talked about, and there should be a discourse surrounding it.
Right. Yeah, if it seems like we're backpedaling here, it's because we kind of are. It's just a sensitive subject to talk about.
And us as cisgendered men are not the authorities here.
Right. So it's difficult for us to talk about it just because we are understanding of anyone who deals with those prejudices, and we obviously want to be sensitive to those people's feelings. Going back to the whole misogyny thing, that's a whole nother can of worms. I like that you bring that up, because I also noticed that, this being my first time seeing this movie, early on in the movie there's Clarice and her female friend in the FBI jogging, and there are a bunch of male FBI trainees like jogging the other way, and they're all like making goo-goo eyes at Clarice. And I thought it was really strange that the movie made a point out of that. And then as we got into that scene that you referenced at the funeral, all the sheriffs were looking at Clarice, and I was like, all right, so they're making a point out of this. And then the way that Hannibal looks at Clarice, he has this intense eye contact with Clarice. And even though it's this intense stare, it contrasts to the way that those other men looked at Clarice. It doesn't, even though he's the convicted serial killer, it just doesn't seem as skeezy for some reason. It just feels more human. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a massive point being made with that.
Yeah, well, did Hannibal ever kill any women in this movie? Yeah, I don't believe he did. I don't know if he did in the other books. I had sort of equated him as, like, being coded as gay.
But he does make a lot of sexual comments about Clarice, and just a lot of sexual comments in general. He says, it was like something, I bet it would be great to know you or something. And just what he said was like very charged.
When I think of Hannibal Lecter and sort of the things that he did and the way that he did them, I always sort of get pulled back to like Jeffrey Dahmer, who was a gay man and a serial killer and also a cannibal. Mm-hmm. One of the things that Hannibal does is he kills Miggs for, I'm going to euphemistically put this as disrespecting Clarice. Mm-hmm. There's sort of a weird allyship to that, where he's sympathetic to that cause because she's the first one that got information out of him.
So, first of all, I think that with Hannibal making so many sexual comments, I thought that was more of like a Freudian reference. Yeah, so also, I thought of the relationship between Hannibal and Clarice as more of like a doctor-patient role play. Clarice is always calling Hannibal doctor. Hannibal says Clarice's name a lot, and he's pretty formal with her at first. So it's almost like he's treating her as a new patient.
Yeah, I would say that's definitely true. He's doing that, but he's doing that to get in their heads because he has the ways of manipulating them. He drove all the other men that came to her crazy. It surprises me that when she offers him that plea deal, he accepts it in exchange for information. And that just doesn't seem like something Hannibal Lecter would do.
I think it was more of his quid pro quo game that he was playing with Clarice. He seems way more interested in getting information about Clarice than he does about anything else.
But, I mean, he also makes it a point to call her at the end of the movie, just to be like, hey, and it feels like there's this equal footingness to it, because if he has this obsession with Clarice, why wouldn't he pursue her further?
As a physical victim, I think that Clarice is very much a mental victim of Hannibal. It's during that last conversation that they have right before he escapes, she's like begging him for a lead. The whole purpose of the quid pro quo game for him was to set it up so that he would win. Some things that support that is like when the senator's daughter, she was kidnapped, and then her mother, the senator, goes on TV and says Catherine's name as much as possible in her speech.
Because it humanizes her.
Right, one of the FBI agents says that, and Hannibal does this with Clarice. He says Clarice's name as much as possible. So I think that's like a little insight into how he's manipulating her.
That's an interesting point, because that is a psychology technique that if you want someone to endear to you faster, you should say their name often.
And Matt, that contrasts to when Buffalo Bill calls Catherine it. He always refers to her as it, Matt.
Oh, damn, you're right. That's a good point. But I think that's also a little bit about the objectification of women.
Yes, that was in that column as well.
Right, but then think about every other time that they talk about women in this movie. It always is about size, and it's always about weight, and it's very dehumanizing. It takes Clarice as the only like female character of the movie to actually say, you know, this woman's not a dress size. She is an actual person with an actual life and actual motivation. And I think that that's what makes this movie good. It knows when to just let certain characters be receptacles of knowledge. Like Clarice is the one that knows this information. She's able to share it with the audience, but she doesn't share it with the other people around her. And so there gets to be things that we know about Hannibal that the others don't know, things that we get to know about Clarice that the others don't know. And so you get to really have a personal relationship with the characters. I just think that it does a good job of getting you as an audience member to understand their point of view, even if it's not a great point of view.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up, as the characters as receptacles of knowledge, and they're kind of revealing things about each other throughout the movie, because there is that moment where Clarice goes to see Hannibal, and he says to Clarice, "It seems like your bleeding hasn't stopped yet." And that was after she had cut herself on that storage unit door.
Mm-hmm.
Which there's no way that he knew that she had been at the storage unit, but there's no way he could have known that she cut herself on the door. So it kind of warps that idea a bit to make you a little bit more afraid of Hannibal as a character, because he seems to have like this omnipotence to him.
You want to know what the genius of that line is? What is the sound that endangered lambs and sheep make? Bleating. Has the bleating stopped yet? It sounds the same, and that ties into with what he says later on with the Silence of the Lambs part. I think that's some subconscious imagery.
That was before they'd even talked about the lambs.
It was, and that's why I don't think that it was obviously not Hannibal having some sort of like omniscient insight. I think that was a drop-in from the writer of this movie, which I think is what's interesting about it, because that's the scene that also sets off the whole rest of the investigation. After she cuts herself and finds that head, then the real investigation starts.
Well, and it was basically Hannibal putting Clarice through a test to see if she was worthy of giving more information to.
Anthony Hopkins really helped to make that role feel alive, because there's something just so incredibly frightening about him, in the same way that there's something about Norman Bates in Psycho that it's like you can tell that there's a loss of humanity there.
And the thing is, he's really only a physical danger in one scene in the movie when he's escaping.
Mm-hmm.
But because of his mannerisms and the way he manipulates, you get this edgy feeling with him on screen throughout the whole movie, because he's playing these mental games.
Yeah, there's this whole idea that like no matter what situation he is in, he is dangerous. And I think that's even reflected in the fact that when she first visits him, his cell has a different overall construction from every other cell that is there. Like his is clearly different. It sort of subconsciously suggests that this is not the same sort of beast. This is something of a different caliber, which I love. I think that it's great, and I love the way that he contrasts so much Buffalo Bill, because Buffalo Bill is also a really interesting villain. That's the thing. This movie has two villains per se, and then they're contrasted by the fact that Buffalo Bill only kills female victims, and as far as the movie goes, Hannibal Lecter only kills male victims.
Going back to, or you said that Hannibal's cell like looks different, and they did originally film with like he just had the classic iron bars for his cell, but they thought that you didn't like it covered up so much of his expressions, and it like created this divide between Clarice and Hannibal that they didn't want, so they made this.
I think it worked really well. I think that
I agree.
Separates, but it does something to like humanize him a little bit more, I suppose, as well, because it's transparency. You actually get to look in and see him, and then whenever we see him, it's not through like this weird prisoner's lens. It's that there is clarity between him and between Clarice, and I think that's really interesting, and then is definitely juxtaposed when Hannibal is later in the cell down at like City Hall, and he's in the cell that they for some reason put in the middle of this room.
Yeah, that didn't seem like a wise decision.
Yeah, I've seen they use that type of cell in so many movies, and I don't understand why they have a cell that is in just the center of a room.
I wonder if it's like then you can see all the walls and all the things that they could possibly interact with, because going to like Shawshank Redemption, like they tunnel through the wall behind this poster, so maybe that's like you get to see everything. I don't know why else they would have that.
Yeah, I suppose that would be the thing that makes the most sense.
There's just so many issues with those scenes where he's in that city hall. For example, the guards, they don't check Hannibal's hands when they cuff him against the bars so that they can give him food or whatever. And his hands, they're like clenched around something that's like the little part of the pen that he uses to pick the lock on the cuffs. And it's like, why would you not like just have him open up his hands?
Yeah.
And also when he does escape, like he poses as one of the cops. He cuts the guy's face off and puts it on top of his own face. But it's so clearly Hannibal. Like these like, do they not know what Hannibal looks like? It's so clearly his hair. I didn't even realize that he had the other face on his face.
Yeah, I thought the exact same thing. I was just like, oh, he's the guy on the ground. But do they not know what their own cop looks like? This is just strange. And I mean, that's a great scene to replicate. And I think that's one of the things that, like, the iconography of certain things in this movie are so classic and so good for referencing, like Hannibal Lecter getting wheeled up with that mask and that straitjacket on.
I had an issue with that one. Why? I guess they were trying to get information out of him, but when they were transferring him, why wouldn't they sedate him?
That's exactly what I was going to bring up. That it's no. I am right there with you. Why wouldn't they sedate him? Especially because he's known to be incredibly dangerous. He's known to be incredibly intelligent. And then they just wheel him out in the open, and it's like, just put him under. Or don't make it so public. That was the other thing, too. It's just like the senator woman comes and meets with him, and there's like a camera crew, and there's all these people around her, and it's like, just let them meet one-on-one, because this is gonna be how he plays mind games. It kind of makes me go back a little bit on my thing that I said about this being some sort of allyship between Hannibal and Clarice, because he reacts really badly towards the senator. Like, there's sort of a similar tete-a-tete with them facing each other in that way. And I think that it's the impersonal nature of it. I think that the fact that she had like a camera crew and all these people around her was something that Hannibal wanted to manipulate. Mm-hmm. And he was able to do so, and ultimately it did lead to him being in a situation where he was able to free himself, because had they continued talking further, you know that their conversation would have had to have had a natural progression that led to deeper and lengthier interactions. And he wanted to insult her, get back to his cell, and GTFO. It's an interesting way of sort of showing that even with Clarice and thinking that they were on, the same level, ultimately it's just not true, because he planned out this whole method of escape and sort of used her as a tool in that escape. And I think that that's really intimidating that he was able to do so well.
Right, it's why you don't want Hannibal Lecter in your head.
Do you know RuPaul's Drag Race?
I know of RuPaul's Drag Race.
So, they just had RuPaul's Drag Race All-Stars Season 5, which is when they have queens from previous seasons come back, and they compete for more money and for more fame. They become the winner of the competition. And I think that it would be interesting for you to know, this is just some fun little extra trivia, but in the second episode of All-Stars 5, they did a song called I'm in Love, where they wrote their own lyrics, and Blair St. Clair from Indianapolis wrote hers about Hannibal Lecter. And so I would like to read to you her verse. I'm in love, I'm in love, I'm in love with Hannibal Lecter. He'll look at me with hunger in his eyes. I'm the whole damn snack. Just serve my heart with a side of fries, supersized. I'm beefing up, and I'll take this pie to first place prize, 'cause I'm in love, I'm in love, I'm in love with him. Wow.
That's good.
Right?
That's really good. It really captures the essence of the movie, I think.
Yeah, that was it. I was thinking too. It was just like, Okay. Listening to it, and she was one of my favorite contestants on the show. But I was like listening to this, I was just like, yeah, there's so many like eat me jokes that you can make with Hannibal Lecter. Do you wanna talk about some trivia? Do you have trivia for me?
I do
Zach?
have some trivia.
Yes.
So how about quiz pro quo?
Oh, quiz pro quo. I like it. That's a good one.
So, number one, what holiday was the film released on?
Christmas.
No.
Damn it. Easter.
No, it was Valentine's Day.
Oh, that makes sense.
So
Well, no, it doesn't.
it really doesn't. There is something to do with the studio that made this movie had another movie that was up for Oscars in 1991, and they thought that movie was going to win a lot. So they tried to rush the release date on this movie so that then this would be eligible for the next year of Oscars or something like that.
That's interesting. And then this one just came out with it. They just hit it big.
Right, which leads me to the next question. This is the third film ever to win the Big Five Oscars. So the Big Five being Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Director, and Best Screenplay. Which of the following is one of the first two movies to do this? So we got Casablanca, Gone with the Wind, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Oh man, that's a good one. I feel like with the first two that you mentioned, they wouldn't have had. I feel like they just didn't have like the best actress category. But I know for sure that One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest won Best Actor for Jack Nicholson and Best Actress for the woman who played Nurse Ratched. So I'm pretty sure that it's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah, you're right. It's interesting that both this and Silence of the Lambs are based off of books.
Well, yeah, so it's Gone with the Wind.
Right. Well, Gone with the Wind is it won some Oscars, but
It won. I'm pretty sure it won Best Picture.
oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, it won that one. I don't think it got Best Actor like you mentioned.
Oh, Clark Gable lost Best Actor. There was Best Actress. It was Vivian Leigh. So it won Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay, and Best Actress. It did not win Best Actor. I wonder if the reason they didn't give it to Clark Gable was because he won the year before.
Okay. I'm going to skip the next one I had because it wasn't that great.
Do you want a filler one? I have a good filler one.
Sure.
Okay. Tak Fujimoto was the cinematographer on this movie. What other movie have we seen his cinematography work in?
Oh God, what other movies have we seen? So we got Signs, we got Bird Box, it's got to be The Conjuring.
It was Signs.
Really?
Yeah, so the cinematographer for this movie, Tak Fujimoto, is the same cinematographer that has done almost all of M. Night Shyamalan's movies.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Now that you mention it, there is kind of a very vague similarity between how both movies were filmed. I think just like from a cinematographical standpoint, and I'm no cinematographer, right. So I'm not like I don't know. Anyways, that's a good one. I like that.
Yeah.
Maybe you should you should quiz me every once in a while.
Oh,
demonstrate my lack of knowledge.
Our next one. That's what the next one will be. I'll do the trivia.
All right. Yeah. We'll do one I've seen a lot. Anyways, next one. Oh, so Hannibal was originally supposed to be in an orange jumpsuit when he was being moved from Baltimore to his new digs, but Anthony Hopkins convinced the directors that he should be dressed in white. What served as his inspiration for that decision?
Decision for moving to white. Was it that he didn't want to look like a pumpkin?
No. It was his inspiration was his very human fear of dentists.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's an interesting notion.
Yeah, so apparently Anthony Hopkins is afraid of the dentist, but also he thought that that would appeal to a lot of other people's fears. So,
There's something really clinical about people in white that is just sort of unsettling. Like, it makes me think of, again, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, where Nurse Ratched is this, like, she's always dressed in white, and all of her images of her are as this, like, oh, pure lovely nurse, and also then you get to see how she acts, and it's horrifying and terrible.
right.
And so then there's that association to be made, and I think that white is often used as like an inverse effect. We think of it as being this symbol of purity, but then it's really malicious in a lot of horror movies.
I think it's almost like this facade kind of idea because it implies this sterility and purity, two things which humans just cannot be because of what we are. So I think there's kind of like that. It's not what it seems kind of idea behind it.
Mm-hmm.
So
For sure.
yeah. So next one, just a fun fact. Hannibal never says the line "Hello, Clarice." It's always like "Good evening, Clarice" or something like that.
I knew that, and at the beginning of this, I still said that he said "Hello, Clarice."
Well,
Which
you weren't referencing that. You were just saying that that's a reference that people make. So
oh yeah,
you're fine.
all the time. Perfect. Thank you. This is Zach Siegel for defense.
Defense attorney of
defense
film references department. All right. Well, last and probably the most important question. Which real-life serial killers was Buffalo Bill's character inspired by?
Ed Gein.
He's one of them. Any other ones? If you name like any other serial killer that you know of, you might be
okay.
right.
So I said, okay, so Ed Gein is obviously because of keeping the skin,
Yes.
the suits. Ed Kemp.
Ed Kemper, yep.
That's a weird one though. That one's a hard because he killed his mother, I believe, and I think that there was a whole thing with that in it. And then I don't know, Ted Bundy.
Yep, Ted Bundy. So those are the kind of like the minor three. So you got Ed Gein, Ed Kemper. I believe Ed Kemper was the one who did the whole van thing where he'd be like, "Oh, I'm trying to move this piece of furniture," and then he would back the woman up into the back of the van like Buffalo Bill did. I think that was kind of Ed Kemper's thing. And then Ted Bundy, of course, just all three of them hunted women. In a very predatory kind of way. Actually, the main one was Gary Heidnik, who I've never actually heard of before. So
Really?
He was he apparently was one who kept women in a pit in his basement.
Okay, and we're gonna say that he was more influential than Ed Gein, who stole their skin.
It's a combination.
He stole their skin, Zach.
But the pit.
I feel like that's a pretty clear reference. Yeah, but everybody has a pit in their basement. Look at the woman who drowned Samara from The Ring. They had a pit. They had a well in their basement. Lots of people have pits in their basement. It is a normal thing. It adds value to the house. Everybody wants a pit. Everybody needs a pit.
Reliable water source.
The pit or a well?
Well, a pit. So hear me out. If you dig a pit into your basement, it's not going to be dry. You're going to hit water at some point. I'm just saying.
Zach, this might have gone off the rails.
This is all getting cut.
Tell me about Gary Heidnik.
That's all I know about him. All I know is that he kept women in a pit. All right, I'm Googling. Oh, well, he only killed 2 women. So he's barely a serial killer. He did kidnap, torture, and rape 6, though. And
that's similar to what Buffalo Bill did, but he also took their goddamn skin.
Right.
But it makes sense to me that they wouldn't go whole in on the Ed Gein thing, and the reason for that is Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which was more specifically Ed Gein-esque, you know? And so when did Texas Chainsaw Massacre come out? I mean, the original film, 1974, so 1974 to this film, I mean, Ed Gein had been established in the genre by then. So it would make sense to say, oh, we're not doing Ed Gein, we're doing this other guy who just happens to also have tendencies of taking people's skin. As sort of like a way to not try to infringe on that, I guess, franchise.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I haven't seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but
Oh man, Zach, we gotta do Texas
I know the
Chainsaw
gist.
Massacre. We gotta do it for the vegans.
Sure. I mean, I'm down. So that's it for trivia or quiz pro quo. Before we go, though, we gotta do our plugs. We do have an Instagram account now. If you want to follow us, it's at Watch No Evil. Also, if you like our podcast or you hate it, please give us a rating and or review on whatever platform you're listening to us on. That will help either more or less people listen to us.
You can subscribe to us as well. We have a YouTube channel where we do the same podcast. We upload it right after the upload to Spotify. So that's Watch No Evil on youtube.com.
Right. Well, thanks for listening to Watch No Evil today. This is Zach.
And this is Matt.
And we'll be back with a new episode next week.